So, let's start.
Sure.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wachama studio in Wageningen. Our guest today is Bart Doorneweert, former farmer, researcher, entrepreneur, and nowadays entrepreneurial educator, where you found more or less the balance between all of your interests, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
This is the short introduction. If you have a practice pitch, how you want to pitch yourself, go for it. But I have a bunch of questions just to go through your life, what motivated you and what drove you on different directions in your life and different steps, and what led you to what you are today and what you do today.
Yeah.
So that's the plan.
Yeah, I liked your abbreviated version.
Oh,
it's,
cool.
It's good enough.
Cool.
Yeah. And then we'll get through the details, I think, throughout this conversation.
Yeah. You are a partner at the Source Institute, and you are also a guest lecturer at Wageningen University, and you are teaching entrepreneurship and business model innovation.
Yes.
You studied originally animal science, and then somehow, you
I wound up in an office.
Yeah. So it's strange, but what I think is very significant that in 2000 you were quite young back then. You went to Uruguay for a year or so.
It was a couple of months. Yeah.
And I know from my experience, because I was also around 20 when I went abroad for a farm internship. It was also a deep experience for me, also personally, somewhat professionally. But how was it for you?
So I went to Uruguay because I was looking to start a farm somewhere, and my parents don't have a farm, so it wasn't like a natural choice for me to get into the business. And it came around, I think, the third year of my education for the animal science degree, that you had to do like a summer internship somewhere. And I heard about like outdoor production systems and systems where investment is a bit cheaper than here in Holland with land prices, etc. And then naturally you sort of diverged to Latin America and New Zealand. And I've never been to Latin America, so I was just curious, and I went there. Yeah. And I worked on the farm there for a couple of months. Yeah.
And was it a very modernized farm, or semi, or compared to the Netherlands? What was your experience?
Yeah, I think it's for Uruguayan standards, it was a pretty high-end farm with good genetics on the farm, and they had proper milking machines and experienced people milking the cows. So that was it was good to do, but it's not quite comparable as to here, because cows are outside all year there. Yeah.
So you had already the mindset that you wanted to be a farmer. You didn't really have the farmer background from your family side, but you were looking for opportunities to actually
to explore and see, is this a good place to maybe start something?
At some point start a farm somewhere. So you had this farmer drive. And in 2012, you were involved in an Argentinian project, which was already more into the economic side and business side of
that was 2002, I think.
2002. Sorry. 2002. Yeah.
So that's a year later. Yeah. So I worked in Uruguay a lot, and then I wanted to look at Argentina, and I had to do like a company internship. So not so much on the farm, but maybe another type of company. And that's how I wound up in that particular context, doing it was sort of a consultancy assignment. So I got one of a consultancy agency here in Wageningen at the time to fund my stay there for the 8 or 9 months I was there. It was an interesting time, because that's also the time that the crisis hit Argentina, and there was like big financial turmoil, and there was lots of things going on, and I was sort of very conservative and apprehensive about the economic side. I was more interested in animals and animal production and natural systems, and but then I got into the whole topic of economics and feasibility due to just the context there and people having that on the top of their mind, basically, and that led to sort of my interests on that area of the system, the production system.
Yeah, so it's interesting that someone has a specific interest, and then in mainstream comes in some totally different attention. Everybody is there is crisis. We want to do something with that, and then you feel the urge that you have to figure out something because you cannot pursue your original interest if for example the financial part is not backed up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then after Argentina you started as a researcher at LEI to the Lanbo Economics Institute.
Yeah, the Agriculture Economics Research
Translated
Institute.
to English is Agricultural Economics Institute.
Now even has a different name now.
Yeah. And you went into research, which is another aspect of the whole thing. You stayed around agriculture and entrepreneurship and economics, but it was more research, so not the doing part, but the...
Yeah, so it's a sort of a practical, very dumb explanation behind that choice. So I had a 4th year for my degree, and I had to do a series of practical internships, really intensive. And somehow during that year I developed an allergy for something to do with barn dust, like a combination of animal skin, flakes and feed. And I could not work on a farm anymore because my eyes would get swollen and my hands would get blisters and the doctor said to me, you have don't become a farmer, think of just do something else. And that's how I sort of migrated into this option of working for the Agriculture Economics Research Institute, who also helped me during my internship in Argentina and with connections there, so I already knew some people, and that's how I sort of rolled into that.
And it was a very intensive experience of work in a sense that you had to travel a lot, so you could build more connections and network, or it was more like just papers and research?
Well, at the time I was very junior, so I was focusing mainly on Dutch agriculture. I worked on a department that focused heavily on the statistics and getting the numbers in, so there was a lot of desk work and
So that's why it's surprising that from the desk, from the very junior position focused on in the Netherlands, you ended up starting a company in India in 2006. So you spent 3 years at the LEI, and then all of a sudden, it's just from your CV, you started an organic or a company called Organic Compound, right? Which was a cotton business in India. We hear your stories in the lectures that it was a social enterprise, but it had also something to do with the value chain of the whole, how to develop the value chain of the whole system. And you had also plans, I don't know if it was succeeded or not, those plans, that you wanted to do it in Africa, in other countries, not just in India, or not?
No, India was big enough.
It was just India. It was just India. And just please tell me something about that. Did you have some connections, friends or mentors who were based in India?
So like during my studies, a good friend of mine, he moved to India and worked for an NGO there. And that was during the time that I was doing my work at the Agriculture Economics Research Institute. And at a certain point during my research sort of budding research career there, I got offered the opportunity to do a PhD on cooperatives and entrepreneurship, and I was really interested in that topic, and I decided to take it. It was a bit of a weird setup for a PhD because it wasn't like a formal thing, but there was like some funding available, and I got like basically a year to write a PhD proposal to get it approved and go into one of the science schools here in Wageningen and then continue research on that. It was like a very complicated process, a lot of politics involved as well. So at a certain point I decided to just cut that project and not do it. And I was really feeling bad, and then the relationship with my friend sort of bubbled up again. We were sort of pinging on and off, and he said he was also fed up with his work at the NGO in India, and he wanted to move from a more like the non-profit angle of development to more profit-based angle on development, social enterprise based, and we just discussed back and forth some ideas of what we could do. And Cotton was somewhere where he had experience, but he also had a really good network in India, a good relationship with an NGO, a small NGO that also had sort of the same vision on business and development. And that's how at least sort of our process of mashing together ideas started there.
Yeah, because the NGOs are very dependent on the donors. And you cannot really innovate in a sense how it would be actually possible, because they have certain goals and they give the money for those certain goals, and you have these constraints.
Yeah, what basically you had in the situation, there were a lot of NGOs working on cotton projects there, but the NGOs were organizing the trade for farmers, and you saw that they just basically lacked on the business sense and creativity and like building really good value for customers and that type of thing, and doing sales. And the incentives were not quite right. So he said maybe we could put like a more commercial type of entity instead of the NGO, which would create a better sort of negotiating position for farmers in supply chains, basically.
And it was the last lecture last week when I heard this, that was also about the financing model, what you wanted to change, or it was other time in India with this circulating.
No, it's the same thing. So cotton would have been the most obvious thing to start with, and like if I would advise myself with my experience now back to my junior self, I would say stick to just the one thing. But we got sort of lured into expansive and over elaborate thinking on our projects, mainly because we had a sort of easy access philanthropist donor who just started a fund, and for tax reasons they needed to just shove a lot of money in some kind of project. So they saw our little thing and then asked us to make it bigger, and then we made it bigger, and we were not only focusing on cotton but also thinking of connecting basically production systems with complementary sowing and harvesting times, so that you could create some kind of a rotating fund between farmers of different sort of crop varieties, to provide funding to certain farmers, to take funding from farmers that don't really need that amount of cash, a lot of cash, and inject that into systems or other complementary seasons where farmers have the need for cash. Right, and when you sow your crop, that's all when you put your cash in the ground, so you have a deficit. But when you harvest and sell your crop, then you have a lot of cash, and there are ways of tying those production systems together.
And I mean, it's whatever was the success rate of your project, it's still a lot within just 2 years in India. Like from the research, just going to India and setting up even just the cotton supply chain and the whole project in 2 years, it's already enough or a lot. But thinking about that, you had this other donor or this finance rotation idea. It
was all the same project. So cotton was one of the things.
Still tough. It's a lot of work. I think it was.
So those were like the 100-hour work week type of things that first-time entrepreneurs tend to do, which I also advise against now, because it's really bad for your health and family life. I also had a kid then, a daughter. She was 3 or 4 at the time. So
Also went to India with you?
No.
Okay. So it was even more hard to be far away from the family. Wow. So and then. There was something wrong with the donor, or the concept of the cotton was good, but the other
we had some ideas for different crops and different projects, and we all tried to visit them and make like plans together with the farmers to involve them and explain the concept, and also hire like local staff to manage the project there. We thought that we would have done enough to create a basis of trust, and that they'll start trying us out and trying to trade with us. But what it actually required was more constant presence and more effort and more investment, and we just did not have the resources in terms of our own time and scope to do that.
Were you two founders?
Yes, we were 2 founders, and we of course we had some staff left and right, but technically it was between the 2 of us. And like you also start to realize that the complexity and the why such a thing as specialization on something exists.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing the trading in rice, you know nothing about trading like coffee or spices or apples or fruit from or cotton. Right, those are completely different businesses, and we thought we could just manage it from the Excel spreadsheet basically,
Nice.
which was not true. Yeah.
So after this you went back to Ley or Wageningen. It was already a different institution. It was already Wageningen.
Yeah, no, what we did, we downscoped the project,
Yeah.
focused on cotton. I worked on that intensively for a year, and I also realized that I did not want to live in India and put my family there. I wanted to go back to Holland, and the idea was to set up a system where we'd have like a marketing and sales office here, which I could run for the cotton company in India, because our customers were also here. But that would require the business in India to grow to a certain amount of revenue that could support such an office. And we couldn't grow it to that level. So at a certain point I had to sort of decide we cannot feasibly finance my job anymore. So I pulled out then. And I went back to my research job basically after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there is still one company working on the basis or the foundation what you set up back then. I found something on the
the company is called Zameen Organic, and on paper it still exists. You need like very complicated permits to trade over state border lines in India. Those are like a little asset you have. So but it's non-functional basically. The website's still there, but that's who knows what somebody might do with it. So the cost of keeping it up is pretty low. Yeah.
So you, after the Indian venture, you spent almost a decade back in research, 7-8 years, right?
Yeah, 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
And in 2011, you started a blog that which is about value chain creation.
Yeah.
And one of the main topic of this blog was the importance of partnerships. I guess when from your Indian experiences, you figured out that's something what maybe we have to put more attention on towards. Whatever we do, partnerships are super important. And I have a question about this, because the whole value chain generation, the blog, and also this topic, it seems to me, I don't know if it's true or not, if it was inspired by Alexander Osterwalder or not, by his work, or just partly.
A lot, yes. But primarily I started the blog because I noticed that I had certain viewpoints or opinions which I could not express in my research work, but which I thought were relevant to explore. So they're sort of new and untapped, and there's not a lot of people working on these types of topics. So it started off basically as sort of a collection of thoughts and ideas I had, and like an open diary, more or less. And then the idea was that maybe somebody would recognize some of these things, and I primarily used it for like sharing when I was like doing a forum discussion or talking to somebody, and just to give them some context, I could send them a link to a blog post, like I've written something about it, like they can look at it in a bit more detail. That was sort of the idea. And I think that around 2010 or 2009, something like that, I learned about Alexander Osterwalder's business model canvas, and I instantly recognized a lot of mistakes I made from the first time I was an entrepreneur with my thing in India, and that a lot of those mistakes could have been prevented by sort of properly structuring and thinking about your business, and not over focusing too much on planning, which sort of the business model canvas is a nice tool to help prevent you from falling into those types of traps. So definitely I'll use that concept as sort of a springboard for thinking about other concepts, like how do you apply this to development projects, basically, which don't do a lot of exploratory research or working based on local context understanding, but have a very sort of centralized planning mindset. Right? So that's how I started playing with the business model canvas, and that led to exploration into like design thinking, and which was also upcoming at that point. And that gave me a whole new understanding of like how do you design a product, how do you design a business, and all those ideas have sort of been collected over time on my blog. And then partnerships was something that, sort of is the main thread now, but since like the last 2 or 3 years. It started off like very broad and So now it's like, basically my topic about partnerships, it deserves like it's maybe its own dedicated web page now, right? It's a jumble, my blog. It's a collection of
because
everything.
I was seeing, and then when the partnership canvas popped up, or the first article, after it was almost taken, almost taking over the whole blog.
So it's just a sign that it's just an expression of where my interest is at the moment, right? And that was at a certain point it was a lot about partnerships.
And I followed some of your courses, or many of your courses, I think already like 4 or 5 times, and I'm not sure exactly if you have said that you know Alexander Osterwalder, Eric Ries, like personally.
No, Alex, I don't know. I've never met Eric Ries.
Okay.
I know Alex.
Cool. So, if anyone is looking into who is Alexander Osterwalder, he is from Geneva, Switzerland.
Switzerland.
Right?
Lausanne,
but he is also very active, or was very active at Stanford and around Silicon Valley. Then we could almost say that you have almost direct access to this Silicon Valley entrepreneurial network. Is it true to some certain extent?
I've never been. But I like a good friend of mine from Serbia is working on a venture there, and I know people there. But I've never been there myself. But if there's some reason to get you introduced to something, maybe I can help out. But I don't know.
Because I mean, even if I've wrote up because I was following courses with you like 2-3 years ago too, and I had these 3 people very related to the topic of entrepreneurship and the basic curriculum, what you have to know. Basically, the business model canvas is the basic to start with. It's good to know. And then I had Alexander Osterwalder, Eric Ries from the Leancamp, or
Lean Startup.
Lean Startup. Sorry, the Leancamp, it was you, or and Steve Blank. And I had these names kind of bonded together, and I was not sure which were you mentioning before. So that's why it's my question. But all of them are like top quality, high performance guys. And so that was the question about this. But since 2015, you kind of found a balance between education, entrepreneurship, and research, because even as an entrepreneurial educator, you have to research and grow and learn a lot all the time, and it's a whole learning process. And then you are a partner at the Source Institute, and I see that on your CV, that partner at Source Institute. Does it have any specific meaning that you have the title partner? Does it have a special connection with one of the main topics of partnership, or it's just
there's more like partner in a personal sense. So if I write about in my blog, is more about strategic partnerships, so collaborations between companies, or maybe within companies, between groups of people. And my status of partner is just being a member of the Source clan, basically.
But I see that you didn't use the title as a founder or whatever.
No, it's actually Salim Virani. He's sort of the founder, and I consider myself a co-founder in that sense, because he came up with the idea to start Source Institute in 2015, I think it was. And I tagged along because I bought into a lot of things you were saying, and I thought I could contribute to that. I'd really like to do that. So And in that sense, I'm not founder, but
And what is Source Institute actually the main focus of what you are doing? Because I see that you are doing some supporting work also in Africa. But what is the main focus?
So what we generally, where our sort of opportunity lies, is in contexts that are really changing really fast. and particularly if you're working on entrepreneurial projects or you're setting up sort of discussion communities to make sense of what's going on, you need to learn in a different way. You cannot tap into guidebooks or the books from the guru because they haven't been written yet, right? And by the time they've been written, your problem or your focus has changed again because the circumstances have changed. So we're looking for fast changing environments where people need to sense make and figure out like what's my next step really quickly. And that's what we do at Source. So basically, we tap into our own history as entrepreneurs and how we figured out things, which is learning from other entrepreneurs, talking about sharing our challenges and failures and also our successes. And we basically develop formats for people to find each other more easily. And once they do find each other, to help to structure their sort of insight and information exchange, to turn their exchange into something actionable they can apply directly, right? It's practical. You can do things right after your discussion, for instance. And there's so much sort of concepts and ideas we have to shape those into formats, but they take like a lot of work and a lot of practice and iteration. We're building like a big repository of these types of tools and trying to provide access to anybody who wants to use those as well.
Yeah. So it's basically a platform, and also you are doing facilitation of these processes by different tools and activities, how you bring people together and to generate this peer-to-peer learning. Yeah. Because in that sense you are right, like everybody, even if they are in the same industry, everybody is on a slightly different angle of the industry, and everybody has their own learning curve, which is like different than the others. So in that sense they can teach much more to each other than someone
a consultant or an expert. Definitely. There's a lot more knowledge embedded in an organization than is being made use of. Then you can see something as our tools are a way of sort of solving, making that liquefying that type of knowledge and making it possible to shift insights from A to B, right? More easily.
And Leancamp, I've seen you were a part of it. It is also, I see, somehow merged with Source Institute a bit. It was also one way of facilitating these gatherings.
Yeah, that's one of our sort of flagship peer-to-peer type of tools, where Leancamp was sort of an unconference concept. Started off again by Salim Varani, I think in 2008 or so in London, and evolved into different types of facilitation formats that you could use during the sessions in the unconference. Sort of increasing the likelihood of getting something actionable out of those sessions through those facilitation formats. We included those types of learnings into programs we designed for Source for our customers, basically. It's one of sort of the leading things we do.
Cool. So it's interesting because 2-3 years ago I've seen your first Leancamp here in Wageningen, and there were all of your partners from Leancamp and Source Institute were here, and all kind of cool people from all over the world who were also traveling extensively and having networks. And I was asking you, geez, how did you meet them or what? And then I remember that you said through Twitter. Is it true to some extent?
Yeah, it's all started with Twitter.
Also, Alexander Osterwalder, he was more from the professional university network. He was also from the
Twitter.
Nice, because you are very active on Twitter. You have more than 8,800 tweets. And
I think I took 10 years to write those, so that puts it a bit into perspective. But
So I wanted to ask, like, what is your relation nowadays with social media, and you have any tips to use, or as an entrepreneur, as someone especially in the food sustainability.
I'm no social media champion. I'm not really good at it, I think. Like, if I would really be really good at it, I'd have more followers. But what I primarily use it for is I follow interesting people that read stuff and share that on Twitter, which is sort of a filter for me on interesting things that I could pick up and explore. And that's the main number one reason is just consuming information and then sharing, of course, like after I read it or if I've shaped my own opinion, what I think about things as well on that. But the main idea is that it's sort of a source for new ideas, new interesting people, new perspectives for me. Yeah.
Okay, I have the same with podcasts.
Okay.
But it definitely takes time to follow many people and many platforms. That's why I'm totally foreign from Twitter. I don't know how it works. So I have like 5 tweets in total. But if you want to go into one of these and really have the real use of it instead of just hanging on it, then it takes time to filter out the noise, let's say.
I only follow like a very limited amount of people, which I sort of know, some personally, but some I know just by really deeply knowing their backgrounds or their interests, and I also curate my feed. So at a certain point, that if I haven't been reading a lot from anybody that's interesting for the last 3 or 4 months, then I'll unfollow them, for instance, right? Which and that creates some more space for trying out following some other people again. So once in a while, just sort of review like what's feeding me, what's feeding my interest, and does that still work for me or not? Yeah.
I have also similarly, like if maybe with refollowing, like if I miss out someone for 2-3 months, then look at what is the last work, what was the last topic, or who was the last person who they got contact with, and what was the outcome of the conversation. It's always nice to see these updates from they are our generation, and they have also thoughts, and they are spreading it, and it directly or indirectly it influencing us. So
and Twitter is also really cool for meeting very busy people. Because they tend to use Twitter as a way to relax a bit, right? So when they have like 5 spare minutes or something, they just sit and they'll go through their feed and they might tweet something out, and that's sort of the moment that when you can sort of respond to what they're doing, right? Tag them and then usually I've had it multiple times that I build a relationship up with people who, like Alex, for instance, who's pretty hard to get at. But the first contact we had was my response to some kind of tweet he had. And I quickly just pitched a project idea or something. Interesting, let's talk, right? And then, it got going from there. So it's a way for making sort of coincidences happen.
Nice. In that sense, many people are very critical about these social media platforms. Of course, we just had this last Facebook scandal with 50 million people's data, but in the end, we have to know how to use them, because it's still very new technologies. Like, imagine when the caveman came up with a fire. In the first generation, there were a lot of accidents, I guess, and problems. And you said that you have this Source Institute has a special focus also on African entrepreneurs, and I don't see that. I'm very curious about your opinion, because you have more insight to the situation in Africa. But many mainstream scientists or these trend watchers, they are saying that Africa is booming, but it cannot be controlled. So they are looking more into the population part of Africa, and they use these trends, what was happening in the last 20-30 years, and they are kind of projecting it to the 2050, for example. 2050 is like some crazy scary number, like
it's pretty far away.
What will gonna happen, we don't know. The population will be 9 billion, and it will be the most of the population growth will be in Africa. But I see, I try to step back and what is happening. We use these trends and data from 30-40 years ago, and since 10 years there is internet almost everywhere, And with the internet, there's a lot of information which allows them also to get into entrepreneurship, education, lots of good stuff. They have the resources. They didn't have the knowledge for a long time because of access, because schooling, education. But now I see a huge potential in education and all kind of good stuff. What can happen there?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How do you see it?
Is your question, what do I see as the opportunity for Africa?
I see it more positively than as a scary thing. Like we hear it from even from here, from Wageningen, like, oh, the population is booming there, we have to feed them. I mean, and I see that they can figure out many better stuff than we could offer to them, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it's getting even to sort of a breaking point where it's best that we, with our sort of our thoughts and our ideas cooked up here, had best just get out of the way.
Yeah.
Because we're in the way, right? We bring our own funding and our own concepts, and we sort of frustrate a lot of processes there. And like the first things of like locally started, locally driven businesses, development, sort of that's coming up there, and I think that's very encouraging. Yeah, because that's what needs to happen. They need to take control for themselves and do it. Yeah, then they can.
Yeah, because for example, it was just this week on Tuesday, I guess, there was a symposium in the Impulse about world hunger and how can we tackle it in the future. And in the whole narrative, the whole discussion, IMF and the World Bank were involved as a constant partners. But I was also asking them, like, hey, but then they are pretty much narrowing down the possibilities of the whole game. How, you know, like the creativity part is like decreasing if you have these huge donors, let's say, or huge parties who wanna invent something or wanna influence.
Like Burkina Faso should just focus on exporting cotton.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Because it looks good on paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you say that in the big picture is more positive than what we see from the media.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even if you change your lens at which you look at society there, drop all your assumptions from here and actually look what's going on. There's lots more wealth and growth there than you can see with our perspectives and mindsets. Yeah. Yeah,
and the other thing was that this economic perspective of seeing things, like if there is no money, they need money.
Yeah.
But you cannot eat money. The most important are the health and food, and to be more conscious about what matters in life.
Yeah. No, but there are subtle things like I did some field research in Kenya when I was still working for the university, and I was lucky to get some funding to do some exploratory research without particular sort of research question or research goal at the moment, but just go there and have a look, and you see like really refined distribution systems where you'd be at a sort of a farmer's market just south of Nairobi, where they were growing particular types of melons.
Yeah.
And they had figured out a distribution system to get those melons to the beach in Mombasa, to specific places where they wanted like the best quality watermelons for their customers, right? So those are like, by just asking and talking to traders and just figuring out like where do you bring these things and why do these go in these crates and why do these go into these crates, etc. They give you some really interesting stories about the refinement of their trade systems, and you think like, okay, they're really thinking of ways of adding value to products already. It's not just feeding people, right? But they're also thinking of increasing quality, giving some kind of an experience to products as well. They're not that different from here. I mean,
for me, entrepreneurship came relatively late in life, let's say. I've grown up in Hungary. That was more, the socialism, and you were not allowed to start your own business. And I didn't have this paradigm. I had somewhere very far away, but when I've heard, like in 2013, 14, that a new boom is coming, like startups everywhere, and it was already reaching the Netherlands and Europe, I was so delighted that, wow, I can do something. I just had to figure out. I'm still figuring out, but in that sense, it's a very positive and great, let's say, movement or process which is happening, which helps society in general, industries. Yeah, people have more choices because these very rigid systems, they don't work that good anymore, like these huge companies. They also struggle with innovation. But there is also a certain romanticizing the entrepreneurial lifestyle, with this overnight successes. You know, you never hear about the struggle what people have. Only you get to know them when they are already in the finish line or closer to the finish line. And also Steve Blank, he just had an interview with someone when he explained that they try to educate entrepreneurship, but in reality entrepreneurship is much more close to art or art schools and the whole process of creating art than any other thing. And how do you see that? Is it you see that is a kind of danger in romanticizing of entrepreneurship, or if it's a good balance between getting the youth attention and involve them, and you have to somehow get the attention and promote this. How do you think that it's presented? It's realistic enough, for example, in the Netherlands, in the Dutch context?
Yeah, I think there's a big sort of word confusion about entrepreneurship. It's like I recently written like a small blog post based on a discussion I had with a couple of mentors I was chatting with for an accelerator program, and we're sort of reviewing the progress of certain startups, and there was one startup looking for investment funding, and that's sort of a very sort of danger zone for an entrepreneur because they spend a lot of time acquiring funds and they spend less time actually refining and developing the business and taking care of their customers, right? Because that's a lot of work to get in that investment funding. And we were having a discussion on like how should you divide our focus, right? And that we got to the discussion, and then we came to sort of a conclusion that at that point what you do as an entrepreneur is you just duct tape together your business and make sure it keeps on going long enough for you to land the investment, close the deal, get the new funds, and after that is the time that you can think of what's the next step I take for my business, right? And I wrote a little blog post about this insight because there's a scene in The Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you've seen that movie. No, you haven't seen it? Okay.
No, well, it's still something what I'm like, okay, I have to
spend a week. There's a scene with one of the characters, an elf is fighting a big troll on a crumbling tower over a big ravine, and the tower is crumbling, and at a certain point it breaks, and like stones fall down, and the elf character sort of steps on those stones as they fall down and moves back up again. Right? So that's what I sense is what entrepreneurship is about, that you do not stand and wait and get a sense of how fast you're falling down those stones, but you keep walking up there, right? And you've entered yourself into sort of a game of speed, of fast decision making, and also of confrontation, of figuring out within a very limited amount of time, will I make this or not, right? And there are a lot of people who have a more lifestyle orientation to entrepreneurship, which is fine, but I think that's more like the art part, right? The artsy part of entrepreneurship actually is that you build a lifestyle where you have more time, where you do have deadlines or interesting projects that you're working on, but that's something different than actually what building a business in a fast-paced environment is about. And I don't consider myself an entrepreneur actually. If I would sort of reflect on the way I define it, I'm more of a contemplative character, I think, but I do work well in entrepreneurial teams. If somebody else sets the pace for me, then okay, I'll join. I'll do that.
Are you familiar with with the book E-Myth from
No.
it's Michael E. Gerber, the E-Myth, the myth of entrepreneurship. And he says that in a business you need to have, even if you are just alone, you need to have three characteristics. One of the visionary, the entrepreneur, one of the manager, and the third is the technician. And even if you are just alone, you have to have all of these characteristics, because otherwise, if you just build a business on your technician skills, then you are just creating a job for yourself. From these three, can you choose one? What is more?
Maybe more the engineering thing. I like building little products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurship for you as an educator, is it just simply interesting because there are many interesting processes how people and businesses interact with each other, or you also see it, because I see it somehow, but maybe you too, as a tool, as a kind of reinvented tool to tackle wicked problems of the world?
Yeah, I think that if you look at it at a larger scale, then yes, it could have a contribution to global impact. But I like already seeing enlightening people.
Yeah.
Or maybe seeing people enlighten other people.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a way of storytelling, it's a way of designing social interactions that makes people like see things, and that's sort of the effect I like to play with and see.
Yeah.
And I think only good things can come from that. So yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
That's the contribution to the world, I guess. Yeah.
And many university accelerators. I think in Wageningen it's much more as a family. Like it's almost everybody knows each other. So I see that the startups are somehow more safe here in Wageningen, in a sense that I've read some critics about university accelerators that one of their purposes that they are used by big companies to kind of indirectly outsource their R&D and have access to cheap knowledge, and in the end they are buying the company or killing the company, whatever. But the original dream of the entrepreneur is get a little bit jeopardized by the big guys. How do you see it? Is that in the Dutch or European context? Is it happening at some extent? And which industries are the most?
You mean like entrepreneurial serfdom or something?
Yeah, I mean that this. What I just explained, that big companies. They don't really nurture the idea or nurture the entrepreneur, but through an accelerator they have access to this knowledge, and nothing is changing because they have their own games and they don't want to be interrupted by any new ideas. So it's happening in energy, I guess. It happens in many other industries. But I don't have I don't research it, but maybe you have some.
But I don't follow your question. Is that
if there is a danger, if you are an entrepreneur, you have a dream, you want to change one part of the world, one specific industry, you see that there is another solution. And you are a student, so you don't have much of life experience or business experience, and you are at an accelerator, and you are, developing your idea because you are passionate and you put your resources, maybe your family's resources in it, and then the idea will stop at one time when you need more funding, or you're gonna get in touch with big companies, and maybe they just give you two options. They're gonna buy you and then you lose your integrity and sovereignty, or they just if you don't want to sell your technique or technology to them, then
Okay,
You
I
are
get
an
it, I get it.
enemy.
Yeah.
So,
So I think that a lot of accelerator programs are designed for profit,
yeah,
right? And what makes a profit is that there are startups that have gone through their program, which they take some equity in, actually get
Yeah.
follow-on funding,
Yeah.
because that creates an opportunity to be bought out.
yeah,
But there are only so many ideas that have a good fit with such a
yeah,
development trajectory, right? And ideas that are divergent or have a smaller goal or are less profitable in that sense, but make some other kind of return, social
Yeah.
return or whatever,
yeah.
they don't fit,
Hmm.
and they drop out of
Yeah.
those programs. Yeah. So I think I think entrepreneurs should always look very creatively and understand like the type of game they're going to play to grow their business.
Yeah.
And if they have like a social impact perspective but go into a highly commercially
Yeah.
oriented type of accelerator,
Yeah.
that's a bad match for you,
Yeah.
right? And that's how ideas die, basically.
Yeah.
Right? But if you are able to sort of go your own way, make your own money, find a group of customers that are willing to
Yeah.
pay you, right? Which gives you a stable basis to grow and develop and try out new things and do things more on your own terms,
Yeah.
rather than compromising to an external investor or some other stakeholder that has a big sort of hold on you.
Yeah.
Then that's a better position maybe to nurture your ideas. And that's why I like startup here as well. It's more like they support any type of student here that wants to build a business, and they don't really have a profit motive to it yet. They just want to see people move and do stuff, right?
Yeah.
And whatever the interest is, and they support it to that, and that's an interesting alternative angle to commercial acceleration, which is only good for nurturing like a very small part.
Yeah,
of
and
the
it's
ideas
getting
out
less
there.
and less popular. I mean, I've heard that nowadays they just more advising that okay, bootstrap your idea. That 1 or 2 years, try to make a minimum viable product on your own and try to sell it, and then you keep your independence, and then you learn.
Yeah. Yeah, even like sort of investment thinkers like and technology thinkers like Tim O'Reilly is talking about building like a venture fund that focuses mainly on customer-funded businesses, right? So show me the proof that there's actually demand for what you're trying to build, right? And if so, then we'll help you grow it. Yeah, and that's also back to the point about Africa and the changes of lenses you need to apply there. Like all the startups in Africa, nearly all the startups, they're all customer funded if they're still around.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is no investor funding.
Yeah.
So, technically, a startup there with a good revenue basis, a good solid growth in customers, is actually pretty solid from an investor perspective, right? And once people start seeing that, the perspective might flip.
Yeah.
It might take a twist in terms of the speed that things will change even there. Yeah.
Cool. A few questions for the end, because we are almost closing. What is the next challenge for Source Institute, or you have other separate project apart from Source?
I'm buckling down on Source more and more. I think that we have like a very disparate collection of experiences and tools we want to build, and we want to figure out how do we equip other people to make a selection of the right tools to apply to whatever event or community gathering that they're hosting, and getting more out of that from the people that are participating, and how do we make sure that people find us to get that type of support. So we'll be doing less of the intermediation ourselves, so our designs, our way of presenting or doing the workshops, but giving people the tools in such a way that they can just pick it up themselves and deploy it. Yeah.
Okay. And as I said already, people can find you in different sources on the internet because you are quite active on Twitter. Can you share with us the main platforms where you are active, the website, your blog?
Yeah, my blog. I haven't really been writing a lot, but
But it's still a useful resource.
Yes. It's valuechaingeneration.com is the blog. If you want to get a hold of me, I think the easiest way is just through Twitter. And then I'll get into email or phone
What
calls.
is your Twitter name?
It is at Bart Doorneweert.
At Bart Doorneweert.
Yeah. And physically I'm here almost every Friday, like now, at the Start Hub in Wageningen. If I can, so can be found in room number 14, just behind the copying machine.
Yeah, cool. And of course, on Source Institute, there is also.
Yes, of course. Yeah, if you go to source.institute, you'll find our contact details there, and also like access to our forum and our blog there as well. Yeah. So I hope to see you there.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bart.
Okay, thank you.
I really
Fun.
enjoyed the conversation, and this is another way of making change. You know, we have to give the tools to people.
Education is pretty important.
Education, so thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Say hi to the people. Or here, this is yours.
This is mine.
Doesn't matter. Bye bye.